we talk about some history on the Fender Princeton and Princeton Reverb, starring in 1968 Princeton Reverb. Hey, James G here with Tarpley Music in Fort Worth, Texas. Remember, we are always online, ready for you at tarpleymusic.com. And please hit subscribe if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet. So, we're talking about kind of the history of the Princeton Reverb amp today. This is a 1968 Princeton Reverb. Now, in 1946, they started with the regular Fender Princeton. It was nicknamed Woody because it didn't have Tolex or anything on it. It was literally just a wooden cabinet. It was the smallest of their amp line. It was 3 watts of power, no controls, not even a power switch. So literally plugged it in, 3 watts of power. So the Champ came out in 1948, making the Princeton the second to the bottom of that line there. And in 1948, the tweed-covered TV front, which was one tube Princeton with a single volume and then a single low pass tone control. So you could just kind of roll off and control the highs on that. In 1956, it received a new cabinet, but in 1961, it became a brown Tolex case. It was a different kind of design was introduced. So instead of it being kind of an oversized Champ, it was more like a Junior Deluxe. So in 1964, the tone control was finally made into a treble and bass split up here, and it was joined by the Princeton Reverb that you see here, which came with the reverb and then speed and intensity for a tremolo, which came on board. And this was blackface from 64 to 67. Well, if you remember, in 64 is when CBS took over, and so there were some changes made. However, in 68, it went to the silver face that you see here with a drop edge around the grill cloth. And the drop edge is this aluminum coverage here that goes all around the grill front. So that kind of was another addition that they did in 1968. And the amp went on and had very few changes and was discontinued in 1981. Well, of course, fast forward through time, all these guys are discovering these old, great little tube amps that you could turn way up and get a lot of crunch out of. And people were really wanting them again. So in 2008, in the summer of 2008, it was reissued as a Fender Princeton amp, and now you can see it. They have a Princeton that's a member of the Tone Master series, and we actually have a video on the Tone Master Princeton right here. If you want to go check that out, really cool amp series. And then there's also a 64 and 68 custom reverb Princeton that's available, a 65 Princeton reverb, and then there's a 62 Tweed. It's a Chris Staple edition that is out now based on the Princeton. So now the original one at the time, it would have been preamp tubes, would have had 4 preamp tubes. There was one 7025, two 12AX7s, and then one 12A T7, and then there was the power tubes were 2 6V6 GTs. They were 12 to 15 watts. It was a 10-inch speaker in there. It could have been, it was either some sort of a Jensen or an Oxford. There were several models at the time, and that was the specs for this amp at the time. And so, like I said, it was really kind of started off as a student model amp. As it grew a little bit, though, a lot of guys were realizing they could have this small little amp for small gigs and for recording. They could turn the volume way up and start pushing the tubes in there and getting a nice, really overdriven sound. Of course, now there's really nothing that beats a vintage clean tone other than a vintage Fender amp. That is merely my opinion. Just a wonderful sound. So we're going to do some of those sounds. I'm going to use a couple of different guitars so you can kind of hear it through some single coil, and then we're going to do it where you can also hear it through with a humbucker. All right, so for this first part of this demo, I'm going to be playing this American Vintage 2 Tele. This is a really cool limited edition Tele because of a quote-unquote accidental belly cut that was done here. We actually have a video on this guitar as well, right here, if you want to check it out. Really cool Tele. But mainly I wanted to use it because I wanted to get a humbucker up front, and so you could kind of hear it through here. And as far as the amp itself, we're going through a Sennheiser E906 to mic it. I'm a little bit off the cone, just so I can get not so much punchiness, but a little bit more just body and warmth. And then the reverb is sitting out at 3. Now remember, these are old spring reverbs, so if you look in the back of this nice dusty cover. It's got this really cool box underneath. It's got, I think, 4 springs is what they did. Could be wrong, but a 2 to 4 springs usually get a real natural spring reverb right from the amp itself. And then treble and bass just sitting at 6. And I'm at about 2.5 here on the volume. And so we're just going to play a little bit so you can hear the amazing warmth of these old tubes and the sound. And then, of course, we'll mess with it a little bit. So here we go. Now this reverb could get ridiculously wet, so even if I just take it up to about a 7, you hear the thickness of this reverb. Right, and that's that tank back there being amplified and echoed. And that's at 7, so if you wanna go swimming, there you go, you can even hear the springs in there as I did that, it's pretty cool. So anyway, going back at 3 again, and now, these came with actually 2 button foot switches for the reverb and the tremolo. So we're gonna do the same thing, and I've got the tremolo playing up here. I got the intensity, really high. It's at a 9, so the intensity is how much is that's gonna push and pull, and of course, the speed is how fast it does it. So this is at a intensity, 9 and a speed of about 5. Now I could take that speed really slow and keep that intensity high. It's almost like a spinning Leslie speaker. So if I take that speed even slower, this is max intensity, the lowest speed. Now we'll kind of go the opposite. We'll not make it, it's not going to be very intense. We'll make it about in the middle as well, 5 and 5. And this just almost gives it a chorusy sound. So before, all these different pedals and all this stuff that happens is just, you know how to manipulate the speed and intensity of a tremolo. You can get a lot of really, really cool really different tones out of it. Okay, so now we're going to do some playing with, I got a Fender Ultra Strat here, and you guessed it, we also have a video on this, so if you want to check it out, it's right here. Really great guitar, extremely versatile Strat. Anyway, so I just kind of want to hear a couple different real common single coil positions through an old amp like this, and you can understand why it could be used in really any kind of a style, whether it's country or rock or jazz or whatever it was. It would work. So right here, I'm sitting in the pickup position with just the bridge pickup. So real bright, almost kind of a telly sound here, but you can get a really great biting sound out of it. Really bitey, right? And so if I switch into the sweet spot right here where I've got the bridge and the neck, where a lot of your real chunky rhythm stuff. Of course, we take it down a little bit. I'm going to leave it right there in that position. Put the tremolo back on. And I've got it at a high intensity and a low speed, so literally 10 and 1, the two extremes. I just love this setting on this amp when you're doing jazz changes. Very velvety sound. And if I'm going all the way to the rhythm pickup just by itself. And once again, if I take that to kind of the middle 5 and 5, I'm going to go position 2. This is my middle and my back to get kind of a chorusy sound. Remember, we can drown out with some reverb, taking the reverb all the way up and that same kind of thing. This is just sitting at a 6. So like I said before, if you wanted to get, more volume out of this or an overdriven sound, you literally will crank this volume all the way up. It's kind of where Overdrive came from. People were trying to play louder, so they cranked up their amps all the way they can. The tubes are overworking, they're overdriven. Next thing you know, you have this gritty, overdriven and distorted rock sound, where it kind of came from. So we're going to do that a little bit with here. So we're sitting at 2.5. Pretty nice, good, clean sound here. But as I crank this up, all of a sudden you're overdriving the tubes. You get a little bit of that overdriven sound. So eventually they figured out, okay, we'll put that as a gain knob, and then you can push the tubes as much as you want and then adjust the volume. But before that, you just cranked it way up, man. So obviously there is a really long history of Fender amps, especially before the British invasion of Marshall amps and things like that. This was the animal there was. So it's not surprising that a lot of other amps have used this basic technology and then tried to change it or do their version or whatever like that. But it's really cool to hear a vintage amp, even like, a Princeton, which at the time was considered kind of a lower end student model amp. But now can definitely stand on its own, get some really, really killer sounds, especially being small, because in the studio, it doesn't matter. You're miking it anyway. So this is really, really cool. But if anything, the way the Tone Master and a lot of the amps are, people that are kind of reusing the sound, you have to remember what they're doing is they're trying to recreate that circuitry. So, and I can let you guys fight it out in the comments. That's fine. You just go all tube or solid state, and everyone's going to have their opinion, and no one's right or wrong. I definitely love it all for different reasons. That's just me. So, but yeah, of course, nothing beats just having an old vintage amp and like sticking in the studio and getting these tones out of it or whatever. But I think a lot of people are making really great amps using the respect of how these amps were made and created. So, but anyway, I hope you got some really cool information and enjoyed hearing this thing being played. It's been really fun this week messing with this and both the 66 Jaguar that we got in from one of our employees had them. So we're definitely taking we've got a video on that Jaguar here too, if you'd like to see that. But it's really cool to just kind of show the history. It's important where stuff came from. So if you enjoyed this video, appreciate it. Just hit like there to show us that you did. And of course, subscribe to our channel if you haven't. Just hit the subscribe there. And if you'd like to know as we drop more videos, you can get notified. We're doing videos constantly. They're constantly uploading every single week. You just turn on notifications, and then we'll see you on that one.